Can you hear me now?
That's what I asked. Is your mic on?
Can you hear me now?
That's funny. Hi,
Hey,
all
right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. All right. So, welcome to the Forge, guys. This is my garage where I've got all my forging equipment, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to make some different stuff today. We're going to start with a real basic project that I like to use. That is forging a leaf key ring, or ring itself. It's going to end up looking like this. Right. Sometimes I make them a little bit smaller. Sometimes I make them a little bit larger, and then other times we can make them so that it's more of a keychain type design, and it'll just hang down like this. The project's going to start out with a square bar, all right, and we're going to forge it down into ultimately one of these rings. I'm going to show you the process along the way. But to go ahead and get started, I'm going to show you around the garage here so you can see some of the different things that I've got going on. The first thing to check out is right in the center of the camera here. We've got my anvil. This is about 100 pounds of dead weight. And the whole point of this thing is to deliver the blows that I'm going to be hitting with the hammer. I'm going to be holding it on top of there, and it's going to help smush the metal together. All right, and it's shaped. I'm going to use some of the different features on the anvil to do some different work, and hopefully we'll be able to make a pretty cool looking leaf here over the next little while. The next thing to check out that I've got is right down in here. These are all my different tools. A lot of these different tools I actually made. I made them from a coil spring, and that looks like this. This is actually a coil spring off of a car. And, I went to a junkyard where they had cars all jacked up off the ground, and I took off a bunch of stuff and took this spring off of a car and made a bunch of these tools out of this. All right, next thing that we're going to take a look at is kind of on the outside here, and we can't see it super well. I'll walk you over to it for a quick second so that we can see it a little bit better. And that is the forge itself. All right, so the forge itself is propane powered, and there's a propane tank underneath it here, and it just goes up to a burner on the top, and that burner creates a lot of heat on the inside there. You can kind of see that it's orangish on the inside, and that orange color is actually the metal glowing because it's so hot. The inside of the forge will continue to get hotter and hotter and hotter as time goes on. So I'll show it again to you guys a little bit later on. All right, to get us started, I'm going to go ahead and take this piece of metal and stick it into the forge, and then we'll go ahead and get started in just a minute here. So as we're waiting for this to heat up, do you guys have any questions for me about what you're seeing in the garage? Yep.
You gotta be ready.
So I get most of my materials from a variety of different places. Like that square bar that you just saw it came from Home Depot. Actually, they sell it; it's pretty cheap. Whereas like the tools that I've made, the things that I end up hitting a lot on, those things came from a coil spring from a car or something along those lines. The steel is a little bit tougher. When I go to make a knife, I actually start off with a piece of steel that's specifically made for knives. This leaf that we're about to do, I can usually do 2 or 3 of them in about an hour, maybe a little bit longer than that. So it'll take us about 45 minutes to go from start to finish. I might get it done a little bit faster than that, but it'll look a little bit rushed if I hurry it up.
Okay, so what do I start with? This one, right?
Yeah, all right. So Sarah here is working on a bracelet that we're actually drifting holes into. And what that means is that we started with a real small hole, and then we're taking stuff and jamming it through there to try to open up that hole as much as we can. And we started off with a real small, skinny tool, this one, and now we're gonna go to a fatter, thicker one.
I need to start a hole. The one
Oh,
I'm doing is a brand new ring, so they can see the punch from the get-go.
Oh, I thought you still had to stretch it. Oh, okay.
It's ready to start a new
Sweet.
hole.
Okay, so we're actually going to start with punching the hole in the first place. To punch a hole, we end up using this tool, and this is called a slot punch, and it's kind of an interesting tool just because it has a flat end to it rather than like a sharp end. And so as we sit there and we pound on this thing, it's going to be slowly punching a hole deeper and deeper into the material. And then eventually we'll flip it over and punch a little slug out. And you'll see that whole process as we go through it here.
Here you go.
Thank you.
I need that.
Yes.
Thanks. It doesn't matter. Flat end, right?
What's that?
Flat end of the hammer?
Doesn't matter. Nice.
Wait, show them.
All right. So what we just did was we started to punch a little bit of a hole, and you can see that that's starting right here. It just made a little bit of an impression. All right. So on the next one, we'll get this hot again, and we'll continue to punch that a little bit deeper each time.
When he hits it, that hole is a lot bigger. It's just because I'm not very strong and I get nervous, so it's still kind of tiny. But I knew to stop hitting because it turned gray again. That's key. Right?
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the very first step of making a leaf keychain here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our square bar, and the very first thing is to knock the corners down and to make it into a tapered end. And one of the things that a lot of people mess up on this step is they make their taper way too long. So we want to be really careful, and we're going to be focusing just on the very end of the bar and knocking the corners down. I'm going to hit one side like once or twice, and then turn it a quarter turn and hit it again once or twice, and kind of go back and forth between those two sides, slowly making a point. And I'll show it to you along the way. All right, so all I've done is drive a little taper to the end of this so that it comes to a point. All right, so one of the other things that you might have seen as my wife and I were just punching the hole was she took the piece of the tool and the punch and actually dipped it into the water as we went along. And the reason that we're doing that is because it protects the tool. If it heats up too much, it actually softens the tool and the tool will begin to mushroom over. And you can see that in a tool like this one. The very end of this is real blunt and kind of fat now. And you can see how it swells out just a little bit at the very tip. And that is a sign that it has been dulled out from use. The end of these tools also goes through quite a lot. It mushrooms out a bit, even if we grind this away after using it again a whole bunch of times, it'll mushroom out a whole bunch of times over again. Yeah, is it hot?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. So we're getting ready to go ahead and punch Sarah's hole just a little bit deeper here. So we're gonna use this this punch. Oh, I know. I realized it after it was far too late.
This sounds a little strange.
Yeah. All right, you ready?
Yeah. All right, confidence.
You got it. Wait. Yeah. There you go. Good.
Water. One more.
Yeah. Nice. That's good.
That's better.
All right, so we can see on this pass made that slot just a little bit deeper and a little bit more defined. So it's getting there. It's going to take a number of different passes to get through this.
Why do I have to dip this
I just
tool?
explained that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
In water?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Good. Never mind. I wasn't paying attention.
So the next step in the leaf, I'm just going to go ahead and refine this point and pull it to a really sharp little point. And this is going to define the body of the leaf quite a bit. The longer this taper is, the longer I draw it out, the longer this part of the leaf will be. So I want to try to go ahead and make this a pretty short little taper like I've got on this leaf and see what we can get out of that. All right, and so now we've refined that point a good bit, and this is ready for the next step. So the next step for this is actually kind of a crucial one, and what we're going to do is put in a shoulder behind this this point that is going to make the backside of the leaf, and then that's going to be the taper to the stem.
Mine's ready again.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want me to give it a whack or two? Or do you want to do it
Go
yourself?
for it. Show them how hard you whack.
All right.
Stupid thing.
So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to trade places here.
Ready?
Yep.
You're off. Cold, right? Yeah, you can see how much better he does when he hits the thing. Because let's see if I can actually show you. How did you show them the hole? Oh, there you go. Now you can see the hole. So he definitely did a lot better than I did with his couple of hits.
So you would actually think that it's hot in here, but we've got the forge outside, and that's for a couple of different reasons. For one, burning propane gives off a lot of carbon monoxide. So I actually have a carbon monoxide detector in the garage right over here on the wall, so that just in case there is a lot of carbon monoxide coming off of it during a burn, that I would find out before it got any dangerous. The other thing is that you're absolutely right that it gets hot inside here. So it's really nice when it's cold out to have the forge pulled in just a little bit more so that the heat gets trapped inside the garage. But at the same time, we keep it out there because it's really important to have the clear ventilation as much as possible. Yeah, and if it falls over or something crazy happens, we don't want it to start a fire. All right, so one of the things you might have also noticed is that we're both wearing long pants and long sleeves. That is because there's a lot of stuff that flies off of the material as you're hitting it. You might have seen that on one of the hammer strikes, especially when it first comes out, that there's stuff that flies off. And we got to wear glasses as well because we don't want any of that stuff to hit us, especially hit us in the eyes or hit us in a vulnerable spot. That'd be really dangerous.
Also, the long pants thing is crucial because if you accidentally hit off one of those little pieces and it goes into your shoe, it hurts a lot. His brother found that out the hard way.
All right, so for the next step, what we're going to do is I'm going to use the corner of the anvil to put in a shoulder that's going to define the backside of the leaf. And this is really done best at the corner of the anvil. And I'm going to kind of pinch the sides in between the hammer and the anvil and make a shoulder out of it so that it defines what is the actual leaf and then what is the stem behind it.
Whoa.
All right, so what we've got here is now a little skinny neck that starts to define what becomes the leaf and what becomes the stem itself. Do you want to try holding the, do you want to try holding the tool in the tongs?
Why?
And then,
So I hit it harder?
Yeah.
Well, it's not so much that. I just get.
right, you get,
It's because it's so high, like it's a little awkward. Maybe I could try it on the railing again.
yeah, you want to?
I'm a little short.
Yeah, you want to try it on the rail?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll leave the hammer down here.
Put it over here.
Yep.
I'm short, so I need more leverage, meaning I need the surface on which I'm hitting to be lower. So that way when I hit, I'm hitting down and not having to reach up and lose a lot of my momentum trying to hit this way. I'm already weaker as it is, so I need to use what I got.
All right, so what we're gonna do this time to try to facilitate making it a little bit easier to hit the tool really hard is I'm gonna use a pair of tongs to hold the tool. And the way I'm gonna do that is I'll just slot it in here in the side. And then the really cool trick is to take a little clip. This is a bracelet. This is actually one of the very first things that I made. And I use this as a tong clip. So I can slide it on the tongs here. And now as I slide it down, it gets real tight. And now I can't actually drop that tool. But what we can do is we can hold it from a distance and strike down on it a lot harder than you could before. Nice. Nice. Water. Yeah. Nice. Making it jump.
Ooh, I missed.
Okay. Good. All right, let me see the hammer.
You gonna flatten it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna flatten it.
Straight in. Just tap it up. That's good. All right, so on that pass, we got a lot deeper. And one of the things that's actually starting to show is this little button on the backside. You can't quite see it. It's starting to just develop. And once that's fully ready and it's really well defined, it'll kind of match the front side. And what we're going to do is we'll poke it from the backside, and a piece of metal will actually drop out. And I'll show you guys that. It'll probably take one more heat to get it ready, and then we'll be able to punch that slug out.
Do you know why it's called a slug?
I have no idea.
I was just curious. It seems like such a strange name for a piece of metal that gets popped out.
Yeah. Like could be related to like a bullet slug. But
interesting. I've never heard that terminology either.
Should we make water?
Sure. Welcome. Yours is ready.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to hold the camera again?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right, so this next pass with the leaf, I'm gonna go ahead and skinny out the neck just a little bit more, not a whole bunch. And then I'm gonna go ahead and start defining the backside of the stem. And what's really crazy here is it's gonna stretch out a whole bunch. When you see how short it starts and how long it becomes after we draw it out, it's pretty impressive. So here we go.
I'm gonna pick you guys up again.
All right, and that's about as skinny as I want to make the neck here to begin. Now I'm going to go ahead and define the backside, and I'm going to do this with the leaf facing up. All right, so you might notice that I'm taking my left hand here and I'm dropping it down really low. And what that's doing is it's creating a pinch point for me right between the corner of the anvil and my hammer. And so it really starts to define that corner a lot faster than it would if I was up here. The force would be a lot more spread out. So by dropping my hand, I can kind of pinch it between the corner of the anvil here and my hammer and make it more effective on each blow. I think you're ready.
Yeah, it's orange.
Yeah. All right, so you can start to see it defines that little slug really well. And now as it cools off, we're gonna flip it over and we're gonna back punch it. And the big thing here is just very carefully lining it up so that it punches back through the same spot where you're at. Nice. Nice.
I think I
Good.
got it.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so that actually punched a hole all the way through. And in just a second here, I'll show you the little slug sitting on the anvil.
Maybe it looks like a slug. Kind of. I don't know. Bless you. Bless you. Bless you. Obviously, you don't want to touch it because it's still ridiculously hot.
Yeah, so
It's right there.
yeah, that tiny little piece of metal is what got poked out. That little piece of metal right now, it's cool.
Oh yeah, it's not hot.
If we had touched it like right after it popped out, it would have still been pretty hot, but it was sitting on a big, huge chunk of metal, which essentially acts like a heat sink. So if you think about it, this is actually a great time to talk about like a thermodynamics problem here that we've got going on. One of the things that we've been talking about in physics, for those of you who have physics right now, is when we take something hot and put it in something cold. And one of the things that's happening here is that the two things will then meet in temperature someplace in the middle. So as we take the hot metal and stick it on this really cold anvil, it actually sucks a lot of the heat straight out of the hot metal and cools it down much faster.
Bless you.
Thanks. Much faster than it would otherwise without the anvil on its own. So what we've got going on is a really small, hot, really, really hot piece of metal mixing with a really big, cold piece of metal. And what we get is a very small temperature change, right? But if I was to take a much bigger piece of metal, say like this big chunk of rod, for instance, right? This is a solid bar. It's pretty heavy. If I were to take this and get it really hot and then stick it on the anvil would stay hot for quite a long time. The fact that this little metal slug is so small, so tiny, that means that it cools down much faster. How much longer it would take for this to heat up compared to our skinny little leaf that we're working on right now. We would have this in from the very beginning of the stream, like 35 minutes ago, and it still wouldn't be hot all the way through if I had it in the forge.
It looks like your leaf is ready.
Yeah.
So he's ready to do his next step of the leaf. So give him a second here and then he'll come show you and explain. I'm gonna grab the computer so you can see.
So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to start bringing my left hand up. I've got a shoulder established that I'm kind of hitting this against. And now I'm going to continue to draw out the stem a few hits at a time and working back and forth and back and forth so that my work is even on both sides. All right, so already this thing is getting stretched out quite a bit. It's almost doubled in length from where it started. And we're gonna continue to draw out this center section a whole bunch here. And that's the whole next step here is just drawing out this center section and making the stem of the leaf a lot thinner. Meanwhile, you're ready.
Oh, okay. Do I still use the same punch to drift or switch
now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start the drift process. All right, so at this point, wow, almost knocked over my water.
Oops, sorry.
All right, so at this point with Sarah's bracelet, right, we've punched a hole all the way through the bracelet. And right now it's kind of an oblong hole. And what we're going to do is we're going to shove a tool through there and make it round. And then we're going to take that round hole and drift it open a whole bunch more progressively as we go through. Now, this has to happen on the big anvil because it's actually got a hole specifically for this.
Which one do I use?
You're going to start with this one.
Okay.
And then you're going to drift it to about, or punch it to
so
about
you can
here.
see the difference. This is what I used to punch the hole. So it's nice and flat and has this like circular oval to it. And now he's having me switch to this.
So this is the first drift that we're going to use. It starts off really skinny so that it fits in between the two sides. And then it's going to make that hole round. And if we go too far, it's actually going to make it square because I didn't do a very good job at rounding this off. So we're only going to use this one part way. And then we're going to use another tool to actually open that hole up all the way.
Thank you. Oh, I missed. Do I need to water this one?
No.
Pull closer.
Yeah, sure.
Far away.
That's good.
Done?
All right, so all we've done is take this first hole. This is the one that we just punched, and we started making it more round. On the next pass, we'll use a different tool, and that'll start opening up that hole a whole lot more.
I'm not going to use this one again.
Now you can go ahead and switch to the other one.
Okay. Which is next? This one?
Big fat one.
That one. Okay.
So the process that we're doing right now, this is called drifting. And drifting is the process of essentially jamming some shape tool through an open hole to reshape the hole or resize the hole. All right. And the drift that we're using today is this one. This is out of a piece of coil spring. And it's interesting to look at another drift that I made in the past and see why it's so important to use good steel, right? So this is actually a coil spring like I showed you earlier, whereas this one we can take a look at is all marred up. And if we look at the end here, the end is like bent and coiled over a little bit. And there's all kinds of scratches all down the length of this thing. And this one's out of mild steel. So this is out of like really cheap, easy to find steel. This one is out of much higher quality, better steel to use. Mm-hmm.
I'm still learning too.
Yeah, I totally made them all myself. I could buy them.
They're expensive.
But yeah, they're expensive. And a whole part of this hobby of blacksmithing is making stuff for yourself and making your own tools. So a lot of my tongs I actually made myself. The pair that we're using right now are actually one of the only pairs of tongs that I bought. Some of the other ones, like this is, again, a coil spring from a car. So these ones are designed to fit pretty fat stock or something pretty wide. That it's got to be a lot bigger. It wouldn't fit for something quite as small as this drift. But it works really well for something like this big chunk of metal that I showed you earlier, right? Whereas the tongs that I was using for this piece of hot metal are actually made out of mild steel. So they're pretty weak and they bend quite easily, especially at this junction right here. So these were my first pair of tongs that I made, and they didn't turn out all that nice. The fact that the ends are different lengths and stuff like that, the details are not all that great. But then if you take a look at the second pair, they are a lot more uniform and a lot more even throughout. Oh yeah, you could totally make a power hammer. There's a number of different plans, and I've looked at a number of different plans and the potential to build one. So essentially what you have to have for a power hammer to work is some sort of real heavy or solid anvil that you're going to be hitting against. And that doesn't need to be very big. It could be as small as, a couple inches. And then on the other side, you need something really heavy that you're going to be dropping against it and pounding the two things together. And then some sort of arm that will lift that heavy weight and drop it over and over again. That's, the basic idea of a power hammer. You could generate that with like a cam system. So you'd have a big cam on a motor, and that would just lift the arm and then drop the arm. And you could do that with a sledgehammer or something like that and get a solid power hammer for home use without spending thousands of dollars. That being said, you definitely get what you pay for. And if you wanted to be serious about it, buying a power hammer is way better than trying to build some homemade contraption if you have the money for it.
Okay, ready?
Yeah. So we're drifting.
We're drifting again.
Yeah.
On the big anvil. Yeah. Nice.
Straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably enough. It's cold.
I want to heat it first.
So if you take a look, this part of the steel is now back to gray. And so that means it's cold. So even though this side was showing a little bit of color when I first brought it up, this side is hot enough. This side's not. We have to stop working on it as soon as we lose that color.
What's the next step on the leaf?
Well, it's still drawing out the stem
Oh, okay.
for
Are
a
you
little
ready?
while here. Yeah, I'm about to do it. Does that light help, or does that wash it out too much?
I don't know that it helps. It's about the same.
Yeah. So now I'm going to focus on just skinnying out this center section and
Nice.
okay. So now we can see that we've gotten rid of that distinctive hump that was in the middle and drawn this out even longer. We're going to keep on drawing this out a good bit more. I think you're ready.
I am?
Yep.
Okay.
We're going to switch to the hardy hole here.
Okay.
Because it's a little bit skinnier. I think part of what's happening is your piece is falling into this big hole
That makes sense.
because it's not supported.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to put it upside down so that you're.
Should I flatten it before I start hitting it, or does it matter?
I don't
Just
think
so that I
it
don't get a weirder bend?
matters. I don't think you're going to get a weirder bend.
Okay.
Nice. Nice. You
That's through.
Yeah.
It's super stuck.
So, trick, go ahead and let go of the
This?
tool. Want to flip it over?
In here?
Just be gentle.
Was that not too gentle enough?
That's okay.
Okay. Now I know better for next time. What happens in that case if I'm not gentle enough?
Well, what ends up happening is you flatten out the point and
The point
of the
this?
tool. Yeah.
Oh.
So you see how it's like kind of mushroomed right now?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Is that bad?
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah.
I messed
It's
with
okay.
this tool.
It's okay. The beautiful thing is I can reforge it.
Look, you can see what he's talking about. It got a little bit flat because I had to hit it right on this part. There. But it's not terrible. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, so you definitely can feel the heat of the steel during certain processes, especially when you're holding a tool, like holding this chisel onto something. Your hand is like right over top of where it's super hot, and that gets really hot, and you can feel it on the back of your hand. There have definitely been times that I've like lost hair on the underside of my hand from having it too close for too long to a really hot piece of steel. But for the most part, like that bar that I'm holding is long enough that it stays cool at the end that I'm holding on to.
Can they all see what the other people are writing?
Mm-hmm.
They can see the whole chat?
I think so.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if they could see the questions that other people were asking that you were responding to. That's cool. it's ready again.
Yeah.
Because it's so thin, it's heating up so fast.
All right. I'm gonna take a whack at the leaf real quick.
Oh yeah.
All right. So this time I'm actually going to show you guys a little bit different technique, and I'm going to use a different part of the anvil. And what's kind of cool with this is it helps stretch out the material in a certain direction. So I'm going to show you real quick what I mean, and then get a feel for it. I'll grab the steel. So what's kind of cool is this part of the anvil is called the horn, and it's rounded over, not quite symmetrically, but it's got this overall curve going across this way. And so what ends up happening is as we put the steel on here and we hit down, it mostly grows in this direction. So it goes in perpendicular to the edge of the anvil here. So what I can do is I can draw out this leaf a whole lot more effectively by using this part of the anvil. Now that it's long enough, I can make it a lot skinnier. No, I'm not currently making the sword. I will show you guys that in just a few minutes, though. Give me just a second to pull that out after I finish this heat.
I think they see it. Am I too close?
You're okay. So there we go. Drew it out a whole bunch more. It's probably going to take I'm going to guess 2 or 3 more heats to finish drawing this out. And then we'll be able to round it off and make the actual leaf. You're on to using the horn.
I am?
Yeah.
All right.
So Sarah here is going to use the horn in a different way. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that hole that we just opened up and slide it over the tip of the horn and sandwich the metal in between the hammer and the horn so that it'll draw those edges out just a little bit more. Just to show you guys some of the other stuff that I'm working on right now. Let's see. So I've got this. The sword is... No.
What is that?
That's Carter's.
Oh, that's your brother's sword.
Yeah, that's Carter's sword. That he's never going to finish. I think the sword's in the back.
Because you were grinding it?
Yeah. So this is actually the sword that I've been working on that you guys might have heard about. Right now, it is still quite unfinished, still in pieces. It doesn't even have a proper handle yet. But the grind is getting there. I'm not quite finished. I want to straighten this up, and I need to polish it out a little bit more. But ultimately, this is turning into quite a beast. One of the really cool things that I like about this is that this piece, the guard, is actually Damascus. So it's got this really swirly texture to it that comes out after I do certain processes to it to develop the grain. And I can actually show you another example of one in just a few minutes here. I've been working on that one for like a year and a half, but I kind of started it way before I was ready to work on it. And then just kind of stalled out for a while and didn't do anything to it. But I've been putting a lot more work on it in the past like month or so, and polishing it up. The guard took me a lot. The Damascus is not super expensive, but it is definitely more expensive than regular steel. So this is actually a couple of my more recent projects. This is a Damascus knife. And you can see how it's got that swirly texture to it. And that is the Damascus pattern. There you can see it pretty well. And if we check out the other side, so this steel, this piece of steel will ultimately have this kind of wavy look to it once I'm done polishing it up. This is actually one of my more common projects, and one of the things that I really like to make. It's a Wizard bottle opener. This one turned out pretty good. I'm satisfied with it. I'd be a little bit happier if I had cleaned up the bottom a little bit more. But this is one of my go-to projects that I make a whole bunch of times. And thank you. This is actually a ring that I've been working on and off for a period of time. And this one is actually Damascus as well. So I'm going to try to get it into the camera here. I don't know if we can get it to focus on it. So this one's Damascus as well. It actually has that swirly texture to it. You can kind of see it poking through on some of the parts, but it's kind of tough to tell. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward with the leaf. I'm going to keep drawing out the stem a little bit more. And on the next heat or two here, we should be getting close to the next step to move forward. All right, so it's just gotten a whole bunch skinnier. I straightened it out a bit. We're going to keep on making it thinner and thinner. Probably after this next heat, we're going to be rounding this out and making it more ring-like. I've been blacksmithing on and off for close to 2 years now. I started at a friend's house. My buddy invited me over. He was like, hey, I do some blacksmithing and make stuff. Why don't you come over and forge with me? I checked it out and I had a blast. I ended up making a knife that I ultimately gave away to my brothers. My very first knife, really cool. And then from there, I was just kind of hooked. I found something that I really like to do and an easy way to pass the time. And so I've been sticking it. I'm making a leaf right now. So I'm making this a ring that's ultimately going to look something like this. And we might end up making a keychain so that it's got a little bit different look to it, a slightly different look to the stem. I might do something. It's more like this. Makes a little bit better of a keychain. And then after that, I want to show you guys a pretty cool little physics problem that we've been doing in physics class lately. So we talked earlier briefly about thermodynamics and the idea of taking something hot and putting it on something cold, or combining it with something cold, right? And we talked about taking the hot metal and putting it on the cold anvil, and how the cold anvil sucks away most of the heat, right? And it makes the piece of metal cool down much faster than it would have otherwise. So what we can do is we can actually calculate how much heat is transferred from one thing to the other and predict how hot the thing actually is, right? I have no idea how hot our forge is other than by looking at the color of the forge itself. And if we go take a look at it right now, compared to earlier, it is significantly hotter than it was. We can see the whole forge is now glowing orange. Our pieces of metal are totally hot, and the inside of that is like almost a yellow color. That is telling me that our piece of metal or the inside of the forge there is somewhere around like 2,000 to 2,200 degrees or so. Yeah, somewhere in that range. Not quite hot enough to do some of the other processes that you might have seen before, something like making Damascus, but definitely hot enough to do quite a bit of forging. All right, so the leaf is ready. I'm going to go ahead and pull it back out and keep drawing it out. All right, so on this next pass, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna square this off. I'm gonna try to make it as square as we can, make the sides even. And then I'm gonna go ahead and round it and make it more like a leaf stem rather than this like square, ugly looking thing that we've got going on right now.
I couldn't find the rose. Oh, it's right here. Did you show them that?
No. One of the pieces that took me the longest, definitely was the hardest thing that I've ever made, was this rose. I made this for my wife's birthday.
So they can see the inside.
All right. So it's actually got layers of petals and stuff like that. This is meant to be a rose like you would buy from the store, you know, pretty fresh and hasn't bloomed very much yet. And this actually came from one solid piece of metal. This is a failed attempt, the first one. I made the stem and I made the petals here. And as I was doing that, the petals all cracked off as I was forging this out, trying to draw out the stem. Oh yeah, she's got the petals in her hand.
You can see why though, because they're so thin. It's crazy. No, don't put that one down there. That's my present.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put it back inside.
Take that back.
I was worried about it.
Mm-hmm. Hey guys, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's watching. This is awesome. I'm having a blast. I hope you guys are enjoying the feed and enjoying the work here. Eventually here, I'm hoping to do a couple more problems, do a couple more different experiments and stuff like that over the next couple of weeks here as we're all stuck in our houses. Yeah, totally.
What am I using now? Am I not using the drift?
No, you're using the horn, remember?
Oh yeah, so I get rid of this now.
Yeah.
It's stuck. Nope, never mind, I got it. How? Oh, I know what you're talking about. So I don't need your help this time.
Nope, it's all on your own.
Man, it's been a while.
All right, so right now we're actually making two different things. We've got a bracelet going on. That's what my wife is making. She's working on it. It's going to have a whole bunch of different linked together little loops. And I'm working on a leaf. It'll ultimately look something along the lines of this. All right, here we go. So she's working on using the horn of the anvil now.
I need to flatten this because it's bending.
Yeah.
See, girls can do it too. That's a little too cold. I need to stop so I don't break it. At least that's what I've learned from Mr. Buckingham.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, she started after I started. I got the bug, and then she's kind of been working with me from time to time as the weather's nice and have nice days that we can actually do this together.
Cold. Do you need this?
No.
You don't need it? Oh yeah, because your bar's longer.
All right. I'm gonna square this off.
Just cleaning off the table for you.
All right. So one of the cool things that we've got going on here is a gentle taper that's happening from the very stem here, from the base of the stem as it goes out. So it's getting a little bit fatter, a little bit fatter, a little bit fatter, kind of like an actual leaf stem would. That's what I was going for. So on the next step, what I'm going to do, it's going to be kind of hard to tell, but I'm going to put it on edge like this. So I've got the diagonal facing up, and I'm going to take the corners off by hitting down on top of the corners.
I gotta go get the dogs. I heard him barking.
Okay.
Is that helping?
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't seen some of my other stuff, I'll go ahead and pull out some of the different things that I've made over the past year or so. I make a lot of bottle openers just because it's something that I know how to do really well. And it's really good practice at fine details and proportions and trying to make things even. So I've made quite a bit of those, but we'll start with some of the more basic ones. These are some of my horsehead bottle openers. So I make these out of a flat bar, and potentially on one of the next ones, I'll show you guys how to do these and what the process looks like for this. It's a little bit different, and it's interesting. The very front half of the horse does not take very long at all, but then the actual bottle opener part takes quite a while to open up the hole as big as you need it for a bottle opener. Some of the other things that I've made, sometimes I make really big, fat, wide leaves like this one and stylize them so that they fit into your hand a little bit better. One of the really common ones that I like a lot are I make this little ram. And this is one of my better ones. I like it quite a bit. It's got a nice little mouth to it and the triangular shape for the bottle opener part. Sometimes I like to make other random stuff. So I'll make this is a hair tie or a hairpin. It is a little bit heavy and I'm still learning from this quite a bit, but this is a basic hairpin that, I don't know if it,
Put it over that, I think. I don't know if they can see what I'm doing.
just barely. Yeah, the problem is there's too much hair almost.
Oh, what if I pull it out so it's only one loop?
There it goes.
I'm styling.
Yeah. You're totally out
Can
of
they
view.
see it?
No.
Oh, yeah.
So I made this hairpin thing. Some of the other stuff that I've worked with a bunch. I've worked with railroad spikes, and railroad spikes are kind of a mixed bag in terms of how good the steel is. So they're really good for things like bottle openers or like little trinkets, and they make okay knives. But a lot of times the railroad spikes, the quality of the steel just isn't as good. So this is actually one of the ones that I'm more proud of. I really like this pattern. I call this a Rubik's Cube twist. And then we've got other ones that are more like this. This one is called a pineapple twist.
Of you have been actually watching from the beginning and saw how I started. Now my hole is that big. Little at a time.
So I showed you guys one of my wizards a few minutes ago, and I think it's kind of interesting to check out another one here that's a little bit different and has a different look to it. So this one is a different look to it. And one of the key differences is that this one I actually soaked in acid for a long time. So it took off the whole finish that was left over by the forge and stripped it down to its bare metal. And then when I washed it off, it made it rust just a little bit. So you can see that that slight rusting to the bottle opener, to the metal. All right. Ready for this leaf?
Yeah. What are you doing?
Rounding the stem.
Oh yeah, that's right. Wait, I have an idea so that I don't shake while you're doing it. I feel like I'm shaking.
It on the table or on the.
Yeah, so they can
Good
see
idea.
better without me moving it too much. There, maybe? I think that will work.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to go ahead and round or start the process to round out this leaf. So if we take a look at it now, it's not quite square, and I've taken off the corners a little bit. And what I'm going to continue to do is just round out this center part and make that more and more round so that it looks better and feels more comfortable. You ready?
Sorry. I think I need to round that. I need to stretch this out more with the,
I think you need to stretch this side out more.
so it's even with the other side. But
Yeah.
I think this one's so wide still. Like this looks
Yeah.
really good in comparison to those three.
This one you didn't finish. I didn't think you had finished that one.
Okay. I was just thinking that I was going to use the Dremel. No, the sander. What do you use to take out the material in the middle?
Dremel.
The Dremel.
It's just gonna.
Just because then it would
take a
be
long time.
even with
Slow
the
going.
width of the others. I can try. I think I'll keep that part and then I'll try stretching that part.
What projects do I see myself working on in the future?
Yeah.
So, oh, yeah, that's a really good question. I'll answer that in a minute. So projects that I see myself working on in the future, I really want to get better at making knives and making swords and stuff like that. Right now, the sword that I'm working on is not that great. I like it, but it could be a whole lot better. It's kind of like swervy and doesn't quite go straight, unfortunately. So I definitely want to work on that. I've got a couple of pieces of steel saved away that I'm looking forward to really turning into a really big knife, and hopefully they'll turn out looking really nice. And then I really want to try more general blacksmithing. As much as I like making knives, it's a lot of time at the grinder and just kind of standing there, not doing a whole lot. And so while making knives is fun, and I like the end product, I definitely want to work on my actual hammer skills a whole lot more and work on my forging better, just trying to improve on that the more I can. Now, to answer Valeria's question, I have no idea what is going to happen in terms of online school or if we're going to have anything going forward. I honestly don't know. If I did know, I'm sure you guys would know as well. At this point, they've not really told us anything. We're kind of...
We know as much as you know.
Yeah, we know as much as you guys know. What I would say is look out for anything coming from the governor. Obviously, he's kind of the one to make any big decisions on this sort of thing. I'm not really sure what's to come. The best I can say is hang in there, try to do your best to keep up with the social distancing. And in the end, when this whole thing seems like it blew over and nothing actually happened, that's a good thing. Because hopefully it doesn't sweep across the nation and cause, disaster and stuff. Yeah, it's getting kind of cold.
Yeah. I thinned it out a bit though. Just a little.
Yeah.
You need this camera, right?
Yes. Getting there, but not quite satisfied with it yet. Hopefully 1 or 2 more heats and this thing will be ready to go.
Is mine red yet?
Oh yeah.
Should I not be calling it red? Should I be calling it orange? Just wondering.
Green it is.
To be more accurate.
Yeah.
The only thing is I feel like I'm now trying to flatten it just because You see the angle on it? So it's like flattening it out, not
So-
rounding it enough. That's what I'm afraid of.
What we can do,
So I'm telling him that this one that I'm trying to stretch out
So-
right here is getting a little bit flat as I'm hitting it, and
Yeah.
I don't want it to be flat. I want to round it.
this edge right here, we're concerned about. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put that in the Hardy hole.
What, this?
Yep, and I want you to turn it on its quarter edge, the
Like
other way. Other way.
Like that?
And what we're gonna do when it's hot is
Poke it down.
use this to try to drive it down.
Okay.
That's my best idea.
Okay. I'm just worried that then it's going to stretch the shape and become more oval rather than circular.
It is.
So what if I, instead of,
But then what you're gonna do is it's gonna be like kind of pinched off, and you're gonna put it here, and
I know,
you're gonna hit like that.
what if I leave that and then deal with the center part to pinch it in here? Because this
fat
is
chance. Remember you
with
tried
this.
that before, and
with your special tool you made.
yeah, but that doesn't. We can totally
That
use
thing.
sprinkler,
Yeah.
but
That pinch is too wide. I need something that's more
Well-
narrow.
this bends down.
Yeah. But I mean, like that is too wide.
The
need it to
curve
be-
of
Yeah, the curve is too wide. I need it to be more narrow to make more of a deeper groove.
It is 7 o'clock, yeah.
Oh, 7 o'clock. Can you take that for me? Thank you. I figure I'll do that afterwards.
How many weeks do you think they'll add to this break?
That is a great question.
That's a
There's
great-
really no way to know at this point.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate. I have no idea what's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it got extended, but at the same time, I could see us going back. It really depends on kind of what happens here over the next week. All right. So this leaf is now almost there. The stem is all rounded out. The next step is we're going to go ahead and flatten the bud into an actual leaf. This is the most satisfying part of the whole thing because I get to draw it out and hit it pretty hard and see this thing actually develop into what it's going to be looking for. So the leaf, you know, it's interesting. A lot of the small stuff, it takes longer to make just one of them than it would take to make like 3 or 4 of them, just because a lot of the time is spent waiting on the thing to heat up, right? So the leaf, right now we're at just about an hour and 20 minutes or so that I've been working on it. And we're almost done with the leaf, but not quite there. But if I was working 2 or 3 of them, we would be at about the same spot right now, working 2 or 3 of them at the exact same time. So if I'm like really trying to make a bunch of stuff, if I'm trying to make gifts or if I'm trying to make things to sell, then I'll make 3 projects at a time rather than just one. But since I'm, interacting with you guys and trying to answer questions and whatnot, and we also have my wife's stuff coming out, I'm trying to only do one at a time.
Flattening out the next section so I can do the next punch.
Nice. I would flip this over.
Uh-huh.
Look at the backside.
Uh-huh.
You see all those hammer marks and grooves?
Yep.
I would hammer those out.
Okay. I gotta heat it up first though, right?
Yeah.
That's not our dog barking. They're inside. I think yours is probably ready to go. It's so thin, it heats so fast.
Yeah, it does.
Sorry.
All right, so the most satisfying part of this whole thing. So now we have our basic leaf shape. Are you sure you're getting that piece hot?
I was gonna say I need to push it farther.
That's what I was thinking.
Thank you.
So while you guys are all sitting here waiting, I figure I can go ahead and show you another small project that I like to do every once in a while. This one doesn't take nearly as long, and I can do this one kind of while we work on the other one. To make these, what I'm going to do. So you guys have already seen these. If you were in my class in the fall, you've seen some of these skulls before. So I'm going to make one of these. These are a pretty neat little quick, easy project that I like to do. And they're pretty cool for like Halloween and stuff like that. And yes, Raphael, people on Fortune Fire make it look so easy. The stuff that they're doing is just insane. So I mentioned earlier that I'm not overly satisfied with my sword. And if we take a look down the length of the sword, you can kind of see why. It's not quite straight. So unfortunately, my inexperience is there. And yes, the show is heavily cut and heavily edited. So obviously it's, not real life. Alex Steele is pretty awesome. I like his videos. I wish there was more actual forging and less talking about forging. You know, I feel like he doesn't actually show you a whole lot of the actual work. It's like a lot of these short cut scenes where you don't get to see what he's actually doing. Then again, you know, trying to make a 15-minute video for a process that takes 8 hours, I guess that's all you can do. Yeah. All right, so the next step for the leaf is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start putting in the marks and drawing out the final design in the leaf. I'm going to do that with this tool. This is a kind of interesting one. It's different than all the rest because it's got this really round, kind of blunt tip to it. And the whole point of this is that when I drive it in, it's going to leave an impression left in the steel, and it's going to spread the steel in the two directions on either side of this punch. Right.
For what?
Just to hold it.
What am I holding? Oh.
So we got a line drawn down the center there. It's a little bit rough, and we'll clean that up on the next heat.
Your forge is starting to make that like sound on occasion. Does that mean that it's starting to run out of gas?
Well, it means the word was pressure.
So one of the tricky things with this, and obviously you have to be super, super careful, is just the control of the propane gas and all that kind of stuff. So he's always monitoring, never walking away, and always making sure that it's working properly, because otherwise, obviously, that could be super dangerous. Now what?
You're to punch in your next hole.
All right, cool. You're gonna hold the.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and
I need.
no, you need
no, wait.
these
I need
ones.
that. You need that one.
Yeah. You can set up the tongue clip.
So I'm back to this punch.
Yes.
So this one is a little bit loose. I gotta turn it this way because otherwise it won't stay.
Put it down around this part.
Because when I went to put it on, it actually slid all the way
Yeah.
down the handle. Maybe just hold it more.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Ready? Maybe. Oh wait, did I finish flattening the next part out? I don't think I finished flattening it out, to be honest.
Not exactly.
I think I need to flatten it.
I think you're okay.
Okay.
Honestly. Yeah, there you go. Nice. Nice. Nice water.
Sizzle.
Yeah. It's called the Leidenfrost effect.
The what effect?
Leidenfrost.
think that's cool.
All right, so we got the second hole started, and you can see on this one, this is a lot crisper and a lot better than that first one when we started earlier.
I'm improving.
You are. You're a lot more confident.
Well, the fact that my hand is not so close to the metal makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
You were right about that. That looks good.
Turned out nice. All right, so there we go. Our leaf is almost complete. On the next heat, I'm just going to clean up those marks. And then we're almost ready to put this thing into a ring shape. I'll grab yours. All right, you ready? Nice go.
Ready. Did you close it? Can I get like another hit in there, or do you think it's cold?
I do have another propane tank, so if it suddenly dies.
Okay. Y'all are hanging in there. It's been taking a while. You're almost done.
Yep.
Hope you're not hungry. Stayed pretty well in my hair.
Yeah.
It's not falling out.
Because you have the
Well, because I have a bun. So it's a little bit wider.
Yeah.
When I just have like a regular ponytail, it just goes whoosh.
Yeah.
Is your leaf ready? It's probably ready. It's so thin.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this.
All right, so that's our final shape of the leaf itself. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a ring. And this involves a couple of steps. It's probably going to take us a couple of heats to get through, but it's a pretty nifty process because we're going to use some different tools and a very different process than you might otherwise expect.
Sophia, to answer your question of how often he does this, it depends on how much time he has. If he could do it every minute of every day, he probably would because he enjoys it so much. With track practices and other things, he wasn't able to do it almost at all for a few weeks. This has been the first chance he's had in like a month to work on it. So if he has time, he does it hours every day. Most of the time now it's just on the weekends, or if he gets home really late, he can do it for like an hour or two. But we also have neighbors, so we have to be kind of conscientious of bedtime and not being super, super loud. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Is it a significant workout?
Yes.
Yes and no.
Only on the arms.
Yeah, it's a workout on like your forearm and a little bit of your shoulder, but not much else. That's about it.
With proper form, it shouldn't be too much of a workout.
Yeah, with actual proper form, you're supposed to be letting the hammer drop and letting the hammer do most of the work. And then when it hits the anvil, a proper like swing, it will actually bounce off the anvil, and that will give you a lot of the lift that you need in between each swing.
You kind of like when you bounce on a trampoline.
Yeah.
So remember how I told you that it sounded like the gas was running out? So this is how I could tell. Right now it's doing this weird like fluff sound. Oh, he just stopped it. I don't know if you guys can actually hear it or not, but it makes sound. He was doing that on purpose so you could actually see it and hear it. But that's a really good sign that the gas is running out, in which case he has a different gas tank and he's going to replace it so that we can work a little bit longer just to finish up this leaf for you guys. And we're back in business, up and running. Ready to do the next hole? Or are you ready to turn your leaf?
Yeah, do the leaf.
Okay. So you notice he's getting out a piece of wood all of a sudden. He's going to use that to help him shape the leaf.
So I'm going to use this different hammer, and this is called a ball peen hammer. And this really small, tiny little hammerhead is going to help me take the leaf from the flat shape that it is right now and make it into a more curved shape that's going to fit as a ring.
You can see that there's dark marks on the wood, and that's because the metal is so hot that it's literally burning the wood as he's doing it. You can see it starts to catch fire on occasion, so we have to be really careful. We actually have a fire extinguisher in here just in case. It smells like a campfire. Hopefully you can see through all the smoke. And there you go. Now you have your little bit rounded shape.
That curved the leaf and gave us a little bit more of a ring profile. And so the next thing that we're going to do is get this thing super hot, and then I'm going to wrap it around a ring form.
Nice.
I missed completely.
The hand wasn't there.
Yeah. He
Alright,
has
so-
actually hit his hand before. It doesn't feel good.
It's getting there.
Hence, he created this device. What is that?
This is the ring mandrel. So this is a tool that's specifically made to size rings, right? So like if I take off this ring, it should slide down to the 10 or 10 and a half, and it slides down. You'll find the writing here. Yeah, right past the 10. Yeah.
You gotta hold it up. They can't see that.
So right about here. All right. So this shows me it's got these little lines on it, and it's got some numbers written next to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the leaf and actually wrap it around this and size the ring to this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it at the skinny side and then poke it up further until I get to the size that I want, because it's easier to wrap it really tight to start and then get it larger and larger than it is to wrap it up on the large side and try to tighten it down. No, I did not make this myself. This one I actually bought because it's got to have the right size for a ring to work out, and so I bought this one.
It has to be even, and it has to have the right kind of material to be made out of, so it doesn't get ruined, right?
Yeah.
Where do you do that? Do you do it with the vise?
Yeah.
In the background, they can see the cup holders you made.
Yeah. All right, so here we go. We've got our ring-shaped object going on. And it's got its little leaf. All right, so I'm gonna get this thing hot again, and we'll finish sizing it. If you can kind of see, I put a chalk line on here, and this chalk line is for me to be able to know when to stop as far as I want to take it up on this mandrel. Get your car working? Almost.
We lost him to the neighbors. He got asked a question about a car and he got distracted. He'll be back. pictures, so he's been working, showing his yeah. That would be awesome. You can see your students are waiting for you.
Yeah.
We're both teachers. He teaches high school physics and I teach middle school robotics, 3D printing and Lego engineering. And so he's been his.
Hey guys, this is my neighbor. You just moved in, so we're just saying hi.
So we figured we would show them this kind of thing because we can't show them this at school. So yeah. So go ahead.
I'm gonna go ahead and stretch this out.
Oh, you too.
Oh, nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
All right, so there's our finished ring. The last thing that we're gonna do to this is we're gonna cut it off.
His students say hi. I just had to tell you because they're actually watching. Your message was delivered, and he said thank you. They just moved in this past month, so like really bad timing because everybody's locked up in their homes, so we haven't really had a chance to meet them. So this was our first one.
Yep. All right, I think yours is probably ready to
Oh yeah.
continue
Punch in.
punching. Nice.
Choke up a little, or back, I guess. Water. I don't have my glasses on. Terrible example. Wait. I just realized I'm being a horrible example right now. There we go. Ooh,
Yeah, that's good stuff.
that was good. Definitely made a deep
Oh
impression.
yeah, you're actually ready to
I'm ready
go
to
ahead
punch
and
it?
punch it. Yeah. Wait, get it lined up.
It's not? Better?
Yeah, better.
The lighting is weird. I can't really see it very well.
There you go. Yeah.
It's awkward because it's so high. Can we do it on this one? It's just really high, so it's like hard on my shoulder. Oh, darn it. Sorry. Moving spaces.
You're off. You're turned.
There?
Yeah. All right, we need to get this hot again.
Okay.
It's too late.
It's too late? Oh,
Yeah.
because it cooled too much?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So last step here for our leaf ring is to cut it off. There are a couple of different ways that we can go about this, but I'm going to go ahead and use a hot cut and cut it off while it's still hot rather than using another tool to like cut it off afterwards. All right. So we're going to bring this over so you can see the anvil real close. And I'm going to take this other piece of steel and put it on the anvil here. And this just protects the anvil so that as I'm cutting, when I get all the way through, it doesn't actually damage the anvil at all.
Watch it pop off and hit your computer. Rafael, yo tengo hambre también. We're almost done, man. Then we can go get some dinner.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take this and I'm going to use the tongs and it'll just snap right off. So now the very last thing that we get to do is straighten this out. So I'm going to put it back in the forge one last time. We're going to get it straightened out on the ring mandrel, make sure everything is good, and then quench it and we'll be all done.
When you say straighten it out, you don't mean undoing that curve. You mean just
No.
like making it more precise, right?
Yeah. I just want to like get it so that the spirals are neater.
Gotcha. Just making sure that was clear. This is not going to be hot, right?
Not anymore.
Okay. Where did you keep it?
I got it.
Wait, if I'm going to do it down here, then you got to turn it. All right. Ready. Wait. Where'd you put the hammer? Drew. You
It's
said
right here.
the hammer somewhere. Ah. And then Mr. Buckingham. That's weird. Oh, wow. Okay.
It's really good. Get the
I think I got it. No?
Nope.
Ay,
There it goes.
I got the slug.
So here's our little slug of metal
I don't want to
again.
touch it because it's still hot.
There we go. All right, so here's the craziest part of this whole thing. Ready? Check this out. This piece of metal is still really hot. Oh,
You dropped it. Oops.
now it's not. So in about a second or two, this piece of metal went from like 800 degrees to touchable, and it's not even warm anymore because we put it in a really big heat sink.
AKA water.
Yeah.
Now, you don't want to do that with a knife, though.
Yeah, and actually, this is actually a good time to talk about a little bit of thermodynamics. One of the things that we do when you're making a knife is you do that process that I just did, which is go from really hot to really cold really quickly.
I'm going to take mine out.
Okay. And in that process, it actually makes the knife harder and makes it more durable, right? The problem is if we do it too fast, it actually ruins the knife, cracks it, puts huge damage all throughout the whole knife and makes it not usable anymore. So if you ever see people on Forged in Fire and they're telling them not to put it in the water, that's why. Water is a really, really good heat absorber. It has a really high heat capacity, so it soaks up heat really fast and it cools the metal down too quickly.
Speaking of which, since I'm not done with my project, I don't want to sink it in water. So where should I put this so that it cools slowly?
You just put it over there on the concrete.
Right here.
Yep. Or I would put it inside that other piece with those other. Yep.
So maybe explain why mine doesn't do that.
Interesting, Luca. That's really interesting. He said that he researched it and the slug came to me in a chunk of lead independently of the mollusk.
Huh.
So here's our finished ring.
Thank you, Luca, for teaching us something new.
Yeah. Hey, thanks everybody for coming out and checking this out. I will definitely be doing another live stream tomorrow at some point. Keep your eye on the Google Classroom page and I will post a new link. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I really did. I enjoyed my time out here and enjoyed talking to y'all. Stay safe.
Go eat.
Go eat.
Don't forget to run.
Don't forget to do some running. You know, stay healthy while we're on this extended break and stay sane. All right. I'll see you guys later.